the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 357. Brother, can you spare a fortune? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson, with the Doge in charge in the background, helping us make the magic. And tonight, we are returning to our slog.
To Major Tom.
This is a group effort. I honestly, what we're doing tonight, I could not do this without Brian because I have not advanced my learning on the streaming capabilities that we're using and just haven't had time. So just for the record though, about a third of my income from my job last year, according to my husband who does our taxes, a little more than a third actually was accounted for by overtime. So that tells you where all my time went. We had a crisis and a half last year, so I have learned nothing about this stuff in the last year.
It's not that Hannah was able to do this to her own devices for the last God knows how many years.
And there is
and
that.
And I thank Brian for everything he does as well, because I tried doing what these guys do for a brief period in 2017. And good God, it was awful. Actually being in charge of the live stream, it's horribly stressful.
And to be fair, I needed Brian's help getting that set up too. So,
but I can't even do any of that because I don't work off of a laptop. I work off of my mobile phone. So, I'm just here lending my voice and my pity conversation to what this is that we do here. And thank you all for being here with us. We appreciate you all.
So yeah, please do donate to Honey. Please do donate to Honey Badger Radio in a way that goes towards Hannah and Brian. I don't know how you do that, but if you find a way to do that and do that, because
I can tell you, and I will do that since we got to do what we got to do. But credit where credit is due. This is a lot of work that gets done in the background, mostly by men, and especially in this case by Brian. So as always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions. And as experiences, both recent and long past, have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. And I will be honest, I got rid of my Patreon account, my personal Patreon account, when I got rid of my YouTube channel. Did both at about the same time when Patreon started canceling people for political opinions and keeping their money. So I don't know if that has ever been fully resolved or not, but I didn't wait around to find out. They didn't. If that was the way they were going to do business, I wasn't going to do business with them. So there you go. But in light of that, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms. I'm probably going to get suspended for something today.
Uh-oh.
Which is, oh gosh, I'll explain in a minute. But you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So, this is actually kind of relevant, now that I think about it. Before I get into the exploitation of our military for Gibbs, for funding Gibbs and training Gibbs and all that kind of stuff, I will point out this. I just had a conversation on Twitter, and just today, yesterday and today, really, that I commented on a tweet that was in response to a tweet that Allison had responded to, which basically these women are just condemning men for being men, right? They hate men. They don't want to acknowledge that anything that men do can be good, that men can be good. And so
Have they ever stopped doing that?
No, they've never stopped doing that, right? So Allison had a few conversations where you could see feminists just condemning men, and they're using the phrase or the term patriarchy, or the phrase patriarchal domination and shit like that over and over again. And so she made an OP tweet. Bear with me. What if the effects of patriarchy are just the effects of biology? And what if feminists are really trying to get men to apologize for their very existence? What if what feminists are really trying to get men to apologize for is their very existence? It was a great tweet, because what feminists are complaining about in terms of patriarchy is largely the history of men taking responsibility for everything dangerous, difficult, dirty, ugly, anything that doesn't involve being safe at home and being sheltered while you enjoy your relationships with your family. Anything that involves creating the ability to do that, so that women and children are kept safe, and men's progeny is kept safe, and that men have a safe haven to go home to. Anything that's involved in that, men have taken responsibility for. They didn't ask women to protect them. They didn't ask women to fight in wars. They didn't ask women to build structures, create all of the amenities that we have today. They didn't ask women to do the manual labor and the risks involved in optimizing civilization. Men did that. So my response, well, this woman responded, I choose to believe that men are not biologically domineering assholes, which means that she's really saying that men are domineering assholes, but she chooses to believe it's not biological. So my response, of course, was, men, in brackets, spend generations laboring and suffering to build civilizations to facilitate the fulfillment of people's physiological and safety needs, the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so they can focus on the social esteem and self-actualization aspect, which are the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy. And then feminists, in quotes, F you, domineering assholes, women first. The butthurt that stemmed from this. The women who got mad. Oh, and one simp. I have a simp. Actually, the simp is the most rabid. And he went full Pee Wee Herman on me. And actually started using I know you are, but what am I? In his responses like a 2-year-old.
Those are the best.
But they're mad at seeing it acknowledged that it's men that built civilization. The simp tried to change it to humans and tried to ignore the fact that it was in response to a woman demonizing men.
Well, because men aren't humans, so it can't be, even if there's some small part of his brain that would acknowledge that it is men that created society. He has to reduce it down to, well, but there might be some women too, so we have to just state humans.
Oh yeah. And I pointed out, if women, all women everywhere in all of civilization went on strike right now, the electricity would still flow,
Hmm.
right? We still have water, sewer, trash, natural gas. Transportation wouldn't break down. We wouldn't lose our supply chain. All of the things that we rely on for survival and comfort, all of the optimization of civilization would still occur.
Well,
But the HR departments would be tragically unable to operate for a day.
well, we're starting to see what's happening when you kick these women out of their unearned places in their respective jobs, and that's because the governmental departments are being defunded, and these people are
Yeah.
being kicked out, and oh, what's that? Nothing has changed, and our coffers are being built with, are just being refilled with all of this money, even though it's obviously it's going to take a while to see the actual benefits of this, because things get held up in stupid courts under stupid judges who believe that our president doesn't have the actual presidential right to do the things that he's doing right now. But yeah, no. These people are losing their jobs, and nothing of value is being lost.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact,
This, by the way, is why I'm so disinterested and fatigued by this argument between the left and the right that's going on these days.
yeah.
Particularly between the left of the right, calling the right of the right woke right, and just digging into this minutia, because you have to ask yourself, what if the left stopped existing tomorrow? What if the right stopped existing tomorrow? Yeah, they would have there would be different things going on. But here's us, having been here for the last 12 years, sort of going on about the real problem. Like, left and right is a symbolic dichotomy, folks, and it's nothing but a false dichotomy. While all these Johnny-come-latelys are arguing about the left and the right, and to what degree we should purify the left and the right, we're here going, this entire discussion was set into motion by, frankly, feminists, and it's been pushed back against by the likes of us. And I don't even know what to call us, anti-feminists or men's rights advocates or whatever. I'm just saying.
Oh, you got to remember, our names came from feminists. They were mad that we were talking about discriminatory law that impacts men, and so they called us men's rights activists.
Yeah, and I'm like, none of these labels that you throw on people matter. Never mind the second or third degree labels that now everyone's arguing about. All these fucking online intellectuals arguing about whether liberalism is the right way to go, or we should go back to liberalism, or we should accelerate beyond liberalism. Like, these words don't matter. You can't fucking define what liberalism means. But you know what you can define? Men and women. And fucking, we've had these political dynasties of misinformation. And yes, I'm going to call it lies. Dynasties of lies that have been going on for at least a century, going on 2 centuries, in which men's destinies have been, dare I say, marginalized by these imagined destinies of women. And like, you're all just sword fighting farts. until you can actually get to grips with where all this happened. I know y'all think it happened with communism, with this class war between the rich and the poor. But that was defeated when communism was defeated, when the original communism was defeated at the fall of the Soviet Union.
No,
The war we're fighting is the war not between men and women, but the war against men by women. And not just by women, but by simp men, by romantic chivalric men and romantic chivalric women. Those are the seeds by which everything else is the creeping ivy growing from it. And I don't know how I accentuate that enough, that the shit everyone else is talking about is secondary or indeed tertiary to the shit we've been trying to talk about for 12 years. And I know I would say that, but that's because we're right. Nyoko! Sorry.
well, and I mean, I while I would like to agree with you, I would also like to expound upon that, because I believe that it is the people who are higher up on that hierarchy who want to control all of us and want to they care about what everybody thinks, feminists and men's rights activists alike. They are here to make sure that we are in a never-ending fucking cycle of arguing against each other, so that they can distract us from what it is that they're actually trying to do. And I it doesn't, while I definitely, I will stand here 10 toes down and agree that there is a war being waged against men, because that is how they wage their war. The men are the tools in which they use to fight this fucking war that they want to expound upon us, and they are quite successful. But it's not just the men against women thing, right? It's not just that. It's just like the fucking NFL and the NBA and any other fucking major sports team that you can think of, because most of the owners have financial stakes in both sides of the game, right? All they want is asses and seats. They just want you to buy a ticket to the game. They just want you to buy their fucking merchandise. They don't care what side of the game you're on. Right? They just want you there. They just want you they just want you invested in the fight.
Yep. And this particular yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I think that's where we all find ourselves, invested in this fight. And, I mean, some of us for the right reasons, some of us for the wrong reasons, but at any point, we are all being used as pawns, and I just choose to fight on the side that says that, hey, listen, men are just as equal players in this game as women are, and maybe we should stop trying to use women to I don't even know how I want to say what I want to say, but yeah, I'm just gonna end it there. Go ahead.
I would go on with it.
It's bums on seats, darling, as we've always said in the theatre industry. It's just about bums on seats. And it should never have been about identity politics to get bums on seats. It's what do you like in life? What do you enjoy in life?
Right.
That should get your bum on a seat. Whether you're male, female, black, white, whatever. But we happen to live in an age where that's not good enough. Like
Right.
your bum has to be
Mhm.
male or female or black or white, and it's usually female and usually
And
not
your
white.
hair has to be blue. When
Yes.
it comes down to it, this
Oh, the
the analogy of the owners in the NFL is a really good one, because what we're dealing with. People think that the anti-male feminist movement is a grassroots movement among women to to take back some of their own after men spent generations domineering them and dominating them and keeping them from achieving, their full potential and blah blah blah. When in reality, none of that is true. Like, it's literally not a men versus women thing.
hmm
It's a commoners versus elite thing.
yes,
The
yes.
elite invented cultural gynocentrism during the 13th century, the 12th or 13th century. Elite, actually, French courtesans invented it. And the goal of cultural gynocentrism, which is different from like family values and having a division of labor and having a recognition that there are things men are more suited to do in general, and there are things that women are more suited to do in general, and that division of labor is going to kind of naturally fall in two different directions because of that. Um but but the idea of a valuing of women, not because of what women do in the world or who women are in the world, but just because they are women,
hmm
over and above everyone else, to the degree that our society favors women in law and policy in ways that are to the detriment of not just men, but also women's children. Like, that was created by the elite to
hmm
pit men and women against each other for the purpose of crippling men's ability to resist enslavement.
Right.
And it has worked. It has worked for centuries. It
hmm
has kept men in check. It has made men compliant with things like conscription, with forced parenthood, being forced to parent other men's children without knowing, being forced to take responsibility for the women around them when the women around them do things that are inadvisable. And during the coverture era, it it forced men to be the shield between the family and the state. And the thing that women rebelled against was, when you're under a shield, that shield also restricts you in some ways,
hmm
right? Just like when you put up an umbrella to keep yourself dry, you can't then feel the rain on your face,
hmm
right? That's pretty solid to to understand that. Yes, Brian, I will read the super chow shortly here. That we had a super chow last week that came in after the bell, and we didn't get to read it. But what I wanted to point out is, as we're discussing this, I want people to keep that in mind, that this idea of pitting men and women against each other as, um, you know, uh, this group of domineering assholes that kept women down for throughout centuries, that women had to rebel against, and women are now getting their own back and all. None of that is grassroots. The women that are latching onto it, they're not latching onto it because it's a grassroots idea that resonates with them. They're latching onto it because they've been inundated, bombarded with it throughout
Yes.
their entire lives, in the public education system, in the
Yeah.
establishment media, the entertainment media, from the people around them, and if they've taken any kind of therapy or any kind of medical psychological treatment whatsoever, it's been inserted into that. They're getting it in their workplace training. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I would even
Yeah.
say that, it kind of it has an almost even more deleterious effect on the Black community, because We were already in a place. Well, listen, after Jim Crow happened, we were good until a point, until um, the Welfare Act became into place, and it just completely demolished the family structure, right? But that was another thing that just completely, I mean, just came in and destroyed the minds of Black women, because it is, oh well, men are, yes, no, men are, they are the ones who are they're the
Yeah.
ones who are holding us back. Meanwhile, it's Big Daddy Government who has told you to kick the fathers of your children out of the house, and but we'll pay you for that. You know what I mean? So it was just completely detrimental, and I think
Yep.
that has such a major impact on
Yeah. Was
the
it
way.
Tommy Sotomayor who said black men were the canaries in the coal mine for men?
Yes, yes, and
People
absolutely were.
people like to talk about the genetic difference between these races, but what I want to see is an experiment along the lines of um, not telling Black people that they are eternal victims of life, because we really haven't seen that kind of control experiment,
Mm.
especially not in America.
Yeah,
We did
Like I
for a very short time,
like there was a brief
and the elite cut
crossover.
it off really fast.
Yeah,
yeah, no,
it went from Jim Crow to Black people are better than white people. It went from white people are better than Black people to Black people are better than white people. Like overnight. I don't know what night it was, but that was that. And for half a century since then, like the American government, and indeed every vassal state of the American government,
There was a short
has been
time.
telling Black people that they're victims of life, and that they need to think of themselves as victims of life, and they need to fight the police and steal from the white man and all that. And
well,
yeah, I know it looks like Black people are stealing from white people all the time, but that what I want to see is an
that's the opposite.
experiment in a country that doesn't teach Black
Doesn't teach
people
people to be victims.
to be victims, and I don't know
Yeah.
if that's ever happened in any country everywhere.
There was a short time in the U.S. between black suffrage and uh, before the civil rights movement, where especially in the North, the black family began to grow and thrive, and you started seeing more and more just integration within society. Now, in the South, that wasn't the same, because they were still resisting the idea of just a normal integrated society. Um, Democrats really were the driving force behind the butthurt there. But there were black men with families who became doctors, lawyers, uh, CEOs of companies. There were black women that worked and became, in fact, one of the earliest um, female millionaires. Gosh, I can't think of her name. She started an industry in black beauty products.
Yeah, and she wasn't even the
God, I can't
first.
think of her name. That's really bad.
She stole it from someone else. And I can't think of her name either, but that just goes to show you how little we really understand about even our own American and ancestry. And I'm not going to call it African American ancestry, because these people
Madam
were
C.J. Walker.
Madam
That's sorry.
C.J. Walker. Yes,
Yeah.
okay. And so I'm gonna go from here, and you know again, like I have said before, African people have had their own historical legacy that has been just erased from our memories, right? We're not taught about it. They exist in books that are not, we're not taught through this public education system that we have, right? Because it would just be, just a little bit disadvantageous. But we have a legacy, right? And it just,
I mean, just being able to acknowledge that progress was being made after
I'm
the
not
crippling
even,
effects of slavery and the crippling
I'm not
effects of
even,
Jim Crow, just
I'm
being
not
able to
even,
acknowledge that progress was being made until the victim narratives got ramped up. That alone should tell you, like, it's definitely the victim narratives that are the problem. It is the demographic versus demographic, when in fact the reality is it's the elite that have pushed all of this. It is the people in government, the people in media, the people in entertainment media, people in education system. Every time you turn around, you're looking at something that you think is just grassroots, and in reality, it's not. It's been
it
pushed.
really, no,
You know.
it really isn't. And the further I dig into my comedic studies, the more I understand how, this goes deeper than
Mm-hmm.
anyone really wants to acknowledge. Right. And again, like I will say it again, because people treat it as if it's a joke. It turns into the "we was kangs" thing, right? But no,
Yeah.
if you actually go and study, like, the Ebers papers, right? There are texts, there are things beyond what we are willing to accept as knowledge, because it has been so ingrained into us that this is just the way of life, right? And that the Greeks just discovered this knowledge, right? Only where the discovered is a very different word from invented.
Right.
So,
Right.
and whatever, I'll leave that there.
Yep.
'Cause
So, but to get it back to, the thing that makes what we just discussed and what I talked about with regard to the Twitter thing relevant to what we're about to talk about with regard to the military actually goes back to a comment somebody posted on last week's show, that alerted me to a name. I didn't know there was a name for this phenomenon called cargo cult mentality. Cargo cult
what?
mentality is the phenomenon where individuals or groups blindly imitate rituals or practices without understanding their underlying principles or purpose, hoping to achieve a desired outcome, like the arrival of material goods or prosperity.
Mm,
So, how that translates into the pitting of women against men, the pitting of blacks against whites, the pitting of religious against non-religious, and so on, is you have this history, this human history of women supporting men, women being the hub of the household and the family, and men optimizing civilization as they went, as they figured out new ways to keep their communities safe, keep their communities secure, keep their communities clean, keep their communities sanitary, um, to banish things that caused illness like shit in the streets, and things like that. Women have now gotten to the point where they want to take over. They're engaging in that cargo cult mentality. They want to take over the things that men have always done, but they don't necessarily have the same level of accountability. They don't understand necessarily the entire purpose of it. Men are inspired to do these things because not only did they want comfort for themselves, but they wanted to ensure the best possible chances of their family's survival and their children's survival. Whereas when you hear women talk about wanting to see more female CEOs, see more women in this industry or that industry, it's about the prestige and the pay, not about the industry's work. And so the comment was actually a response to the discussion about what's going on in South Africa right now. But it really heavily applies to feminism. And it really heavily applies to the feminist takeover of the military. Before we get into that, I'm going to read 2 super chows by Meredith G. Last week, Meredith G gave us a super chow that didn't come in till after the bell, and it needs to be read. And this is sort of segues into that. She gave us $5 and said, HBR News 504, which actually I think we just had the wrong number up. Trump's meeting with the South African president has J.D. Vance written all over it. As Hannah pointed out, we've seen this policy before. We saw it in Zimbabwe. It's communism using grievance grifting to seize power. We also saw it in Jamaica in the 1970s. How did that work out? What about in the Soviet Union in the earlier 20th century and the starvation that rolled through Eastern Europe as the farms became the primary target of attack? And this is pretty much my point. When you decide, gosh, these people have built something good, but they left us out of it, we want it and we're going to take it from them, and then you do, and you don't know how they built it, why they built it. Why is actually as important as how, too. And how they run it, you end up creating a mess. The cargo cult mentality came from apparently people in Hawaii trying to imitate the military bringing in goods by building runways and things, even though there was no system to land anything on them and deliver the goods. And I believe it was Hawaii, but it may have been elsewhere after World War II. So it's kind of it's not an old term, but it's an interesting term. That idea of imitating, right? The element, the elements of a system of achievement, but not the ones that actually create achievement. And then not understanding why the imitation fails. And in terms of what we're discussing with regard to the military, the relevance of that is women trying to control the military. Military discipline, military service, military action, those things have all existed long before this country existed. And they've always been reliant upon male labor, male risk, male ingenuity, male willingness. And of course it's been male dominated because it's been men that have been used as soldiers throughout modern history. And as a result, everything about the military, the way that it's built, the way that it runs, the way that it's designed, right? The way that it interacts within itself, the way that it interacts with the outside, everything about it is masculine, right? Everything about it is essentially made to work with men. And in the middle of the 20th century, it sort of became more common. And I mean, this sort of started with our Civil War, but it really didn't hit commonality till about the middle of the 20th century, the early part of the 20th century, really, the first and Second World War, that women started getting involved in capacities like being nurses and nursing assistants and being in the medical part of the military and being in the administrative, not administrative like boss administrative, but data entry, doing the paperwork end of the military. Like, women started to get more involved, and women have never been a big part of the military, and they've really never been a big part of the fighting force in the United States. And in fact, for a long time, there weren't even any positions for women in the military. So this is definitely an area where this was built by men. It is maintained by men. It has always been optimized by men. It has been optimized through masculine means and masculine understanding of optimization. And women getting involved isn't necessarily in and of itself detrimental to that, as long as women understand that this is a masculine environment and it's not women's place to come in and change it, right? But in the 1990s, a little bit during the 1980s, but more during the 1990s, women began pushing hard to change it. And that
It's
push... Oh, go ahead.
no, it's. I have a long rant on my mind, but I don't know if I'm going to get through it. You can get through to normies when it comes to communism by sort of posing to them the idea that what if everyone in school was just given an A? What if it didn't matter how well they did on their tests? What if everyone was just given an A plus,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone was just advanced in the same way? They would sort of go, well, no, that doesn't make sense, because then you'd be putting people who aren't qualified into jobs into which they should be qualified. And it makes perfect sense to any given person, even a midwit, even an absolute fuckwit. They can sort of understand. No, you don't just give an A plus to everyone, because society would break down. But then once they're introduced to the to the idea that women and men don't get the same grades in all the same subjects, or indeed different races of people don't get the same marks in all the same subjects, and they go, well, that's different. They if that's not happening, it can't possibly be for genetic reasons. When it's not that those people need to be adjusted, it's that society needs to be adjusted in their or it's not that it's not even that they don't it's not even that they don't need to be adjusted, it's that they can't be adjusted because people are just different. I know we're all hell bent on this equality thing, but really, people really are different. And
Yeah.
and in the same way that if some people get 50% on their test and some people get 100% on their test, it's because different people have different abilities. And if women get lower on certain tests and men get lower on certain tests, it's not because women and men are being held back in those ways. It's because people are different. And the same goes for racial things. Again, I refer back to my earlier notion that it's difficult to actually assess how different races are differently proficient at these tests until you stop teaching certain races to be victims, or teaching certain sexes to be victims. And to get that through to normies is particularly difficult because they've had their heads fucking brainwashed by the mass media. Like they can understand that stupid people and smart people are different, but they can't quite understand what it is that makes people stupid or smart in different directions. especially when it comes to sexes and races. At that point, they go, "Oh well, no, in that case, everyone is equal, and you can't possibly say that they're not, or else you're a sexist and a racist." And that's why it's been so easy for communism to bury itself in the general mindset of the West. The class divide didn't quite work out, except in Soviet Russia and China, but it was absolutely able to bury itself in the West in general, along the lines of race and sex, because even the average normie can't quite get their heads around the way men and women are different and races are different in the same way the rich and the poor are different, but on sort of different levels. And it is very much on different levels, because the rich got that way because their ancestors were competent, and the poor got that way because their ancestors were not competent. In the same way, well, it's not even in the same way. Women aren't that way, and men aren't that way because of genetic determination, and different races aren't that way because of genetic determination. And I'm going to stop talking because I think I might have got us in trouble by even suggesting any of the things I've just suggested. You know what I mean?
It's very possible, but I mean, we're already demonetized, so there you go. But the upshot is, you cannot take people who do not understand a system and just plug them in because demographic equality, blah blah blah, and have it work the same as it did with the people who know what they're doing in that system. So, to add to that, now we have Meredith G's second super chow, which is she gave us another $5 and said, HBR Talk 357, when men go on strike, society loses its basic needs and comforts. When women go on strike, your children become messed up and all moral foundation flies out the window as traditional morality is replaced by a victim narrative. Welcome to decades of women on strike. And that's the very salient point, because we have had decades of women insisting that they'd rather fill men's roles than women's. And they're not happier, but they think they're supposed to be. And so their complaints are all, it's men's fault that we're not satisfied with this. It's men's fault that we're spinning our wheels and not progressing. It's men's fault that we're not also achieving women's roles, achieving our best potential in women's roles while we're trying to fill men's roles. When in reality, the truth is you can't do it all. You have to pick a path and take that path. And the idea that you can take all the paths and do everything just as well as the person that focuses on just one path is a myth promoted by the elite to pit women against men, to keep men stressed enough that they will not fight back against that enslavement. But in any case, oh gosh, we have an idiot in our vertical chat.
Don't
So
look at the vertical chat.
I know. Take out the mega trash. I'll tell you what. You can go to a doctor that flunked out of high school and was given access to university because equality. And I'll stick with my doctor that actually got straight A's in school and did the homework and studied properly, knows anatomy and physiology, has studied various aspects of human health, and will do what needs to be done in order to maintain mine, because I don't want to die in my 50s. So there you go. In any case, so we are at the actual, this is what we're looking at. Now, last week we started on this page as well. I want to just remind people what we're looking at here. This is usaspending.gov. This is spending on studying sexual assault prevention in the military and sexual harassment prevention in the military. And these are things that, like in the 19th century, nobody ever heard of this idea of dealing with sexual assault in the military. If you brought up sexual assault in the military, the men would all look at you like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? In the first half of the 20th century, this was unheard of. This was not something that anybody had anything to say about. That in the military, within the military, that this would be a problem, right? It's only in the second half of the 20th century that anything was brought up about this. And it really kind of crystallized in the public eye, at least, with the tailhook scandal, where there was a lot of rowdy behavior, drunken behavior at a party that really isn't something that you would have seen happening in a military environment before there were women. Like, men might have gotten drunk together, but there would not have been colleagues there that were the opposite sex. So just bear in mind, with that cargo cult mentality, women entering into the military are entering into an environment that was built, maintained, and optimized by men for centuries without women's involvement. Right? Very little involvement. All their involvement was outside involvement, not as part of the military. Like, women might follow the military and do cooking and things like that. Provide assistance if their husbands were in the military during the Revolutionary War. But it wasn't something where women were soldiers in large numbers. There were a few women that stepped up when men got injured, or there was a woman here and there that did something like spying. But the overwhelming majority, like 99.9% repeating, all male. And when women did step into this, they stepped into that all-male masculine environment and demanded change. The demand for change didn't come immediately, but when it did come, it came with a price tag. So one of these that I will look at, we looked at training that soldiers are subjected to last week and the week before. Now we're going to look at something else. This is research that is funded by the Department of Defense. So this ASM research company, this one initiative is $2.9 million. They got paid $2.9 million to research what? Operations maintenance for the Defense Sexual Assault Incident Database. There's so much of a problem between men and women in the military that they need to spend $2.9 million figuring out how to maintain a database of incident reports. I want to get people to understand, like, if you're just a layman and you don't, databases are often just lists of numbers or lists of incidents that are stored in something like a spreadsheet, right? Not anything complicated. But for this, or they may be stored in a server, or even just a single storage unit of paperwork, or of like digital paperwork, where you have a filing system that's been created. Not unlike the library's Dewey Decimal System, except that it's more in terms of what year who it was reported to and things like that. And they needed almost 3 million, nearly 3 million. That women are so perpendicular to how the military works that it costs almost $3 million just to build a database of one type of conflict between men and women in the military. And this research organization, the total amount that they've received via 28 different transactions for different things that they've provided, different research, different like creating databases and training and so on, 20.3 million. And their goal here, what the thing that we're looking at that was almost 3 million is described on this page. ASM Research LLC, well, this is who they are, is a solutions integrator specializing in information technology services for federal government organizations with a particular focus on the Department of Defense and its components. We look at they hold a significant indefinite delivery contract with the Defense Human Resources activity valued at 18.1 million, primarily focused on supporting sexual assault prevention response offices, defense sexual assault incident database. So what a indefinite delivery contract is that they own, their contract doesn't end. They're just consistently employed, hired, used by the military to create and maintain and optimize this database for tracking, this particular type of conflict between men and women in the military that did not have any kind of authoritative response or documented existence when it was all just men as a conflict between men and other men.
Maybe we need two different military divisions, male and female. Was that ever a thing? I feel like that might have been a thing once upon a time.
Not in the United States. We never really, we didn't have a separate female military. But I think the only way to have women in the military may be to have a separate female military. But then the question becomes, is it worth the money?
Indeed.
Maybe if we're going to have women have obligations that are related to national defense, maybe we should start looking somewhere other than the jobs men do and stop interfering with the jobs men do. And I hate to say this because I don't like that the draft is gendered. I think that it should not be gendered. I don't think it should exist. And I think that it is an act of discrimination against men that it is gendered. But the solution does not seem to be forcing men in the military to accommodate basically an uncontacted tribe that has no clue what they're getting into when they get in. And it doesn't understand the reality of how that system works, why that system works, and what it's really for. Right? There's a very small percentage maybe of women that understand, but women have as a demographic, women have acted like a tribe that's been left behind in terms of understanding the way civilization works for centuries, because we never had to. We always have been able to rely on men to drive everything forward. We've always been able to rely on men to to maintain our safety, our security, our sustenance, right? Even if, well, women do the cooking. Even if women did the cooking, right? Which isn't necessarily always true. It's men for centuries who brought home the bacon. In fact, when the bacon had to be hunted down and killed, it was exclusively men. So, yeah, we really are, as a gender, the equivalent of, when it comes to what men have built in both the aspects of civilization that keep us supplied and protected and comfortable, and the aspects of the military that keep the country safe and supplied, protected, comfortable. Women are almost like a tribe that has never been civilized.
As I understand it, when anyone passes basic military training, they get assigned to a particular job within the military. It could be infantry, it could be artillery, it could be intelligence, it could be medical units,
Mm-hmm.
and you could do exactly the same thing with female applicants, and it would make sense to give them the same standards. And if you give them the same standards, you'll find none of them qualify for the infantry, and none of them qualify for the artillery, but some may qualify for the medical units, and some might even qualify for the intelligence department. We can cross those bridges when they come to them, and that should be the case. And I think in a lot of countries it is the case, and it has always been the case. And you can do that quite easily without throwing unqualified women into the infantry.
Yeah.
In a situation where it might sort of bugger up the dynamics of an otherwise all male division, because, as has been understood for literally thousands of years, one woman in a division of 100 men will completely fuck up the provisions of those 100 men, because they will want to defend that woman rather than defend each other. Because, and I need to step over some rakes right now, in terms of how men really do want to protect women naturally. That's not to say that gynocentrism is natural, or that any of this romantic chivalry is natural. But yeah, 100 men can work as a very well-oiled unit. But the moment you throw a single woman into that unit of 100 men, you fuck up the system.
It's like throwing a rock into the gears.
Yes, and that's because men like to protect women. And yes, you might say that's because of some kind of natural gynocentrism. Maybe it is, or maybe we can call that something else. Or maybe we don't need to fuck around with words or what they mean. But it's sort of obvious, even without words, that if you throw a woman in with 100 men, like that unit of 100 men is not quite so efficiently as it did before. It's kind of obvious. And it's the armed forces have always worked as not just principally male, but entirely male. And you can try and fuck that up if you like, but as long as military units need to exist, it seems they do need to exist as, yes, 100% male, because men are stronger and faster than women. And I realize there are a great many people who will find that statement controversial, but that's because we found ourselves surrounded by feminist fucking demagogues who can't quite get on board with the notion that men are stronger and faster than women, but they are. It's the same reason that men. We found this situation where men can participate in women's sports because we're not allowed to say that men are faster and stronger than women. How dare you say men are stronger and faster than women? They're not men. If they call themselves women, they're men. And it's this starburst of completely incorrect conclusions that has found its way burning through our civilization. The idea that men are stronger and faster than women. You can't say that. You just can't say that. It is true, but you can't say that. And we will tear up every part of our civilization in pursuit of denying that men are stronger and faster than women.
Now, there's another aspect as well, and I know I'm going to get pushback for this, but when it comes to things like creating a system of defense or creating a system for the distribution of something like electricity or groceries or medical care, anything like that, men are more capable than women in that area, and men are more focused than women on the job at hand. And even in down times when they goof off, they recognize the difference between goofing off and being aggressive, and they recognize the difference between work and goofing off. And women blur the lines on both sides of goofing off, between goofing off and work and between goofing off and aggression. You have to catch boys during their teenage years or young men during their still wet behind the ears adulthood years, out of environments where maybe they didn't get the full benefit of their upbringing by a dad, before you run into guys who don't understand fully the difference between work and play, and don't fully understand the difference between play and aggression. And usually in a system where it's all men, the men of the system will handle that situation where the one individual young man, or almost but not quite yet a man, doesn't understand those differences. And they'll handle it sometimes pretty roughly, but they will handle it. And that individual becomes a better individual, better part of the community, more prepared to enjoy his own success in life, and so on. And that's sort of what the military used to do for men in return for their service, was that it honed their skill at doing their work and at engaging with each other, and at taking responsibility for themselves and their families. And so when they would come out of the military, if they chose to not make the military their career, wherever they took those skills, those would contribute to their performance in their job, their profession, their family life, everything, to the degree that they would be more successful in what they did than they would have been if they had not had that military service. But when you throw women in there unable to differentiate between work and play, or play and aggression, and you can't be as rough with women in training them on the difference, and you can't keep them from finding and interacting with the guys that haven't understood that difference yet, and then getting wounded emotionally by the situation and making complaints, then you end up with this system that we're looking at. Ultimately, since 2002, the dollars obligated to spend on this one contract have amounted to $2.1 billion. We have had to spend $2.1 billion over the last couple decades just documenting this problem. Right? We go to the next one that I wanted to look at, the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. This one, again, Department of Defense, $3 million to study. This was a cluster randomized controlled trial of XCOR, a multi-level sexual assault prevention intervention for active duty airmen. So this is about not studying, say, the prevalence or problems caused by sexual misconduct in the military, but a training system for preventing sexual misconduct in the military. This university, and there have been several universities, this university has had 894 transactions and received $192.3 million. So again, brother, can you spare a small fortune? That's actually a big fortune. Like, I could probably have my whole immediate family set for life with that much money and still find places where I could donate money and not go broke.
But in terms of how much the US government is wasting, this is a pittance. But
I know it's a drop in the bucket.
yeah.
But in fact, just on this subject, this is a drop in the bucket. We go back to that the page where we started, right? We're looking at millions and millions just on contracts, individual contracts, not IDVs. Just in a search using the keywords sexual assault, and that doesn't include. There's 13 grants here. See if this will show them, and that's just more recent grants. And University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston is at the top, but there's Arizona State University, New York University, University of Florida, Rhode Island Hospital. So there's different entities that are getting this money, and you see the IDVs. There's several different. We looked at Catharsis Productions previously. This is looking at what they got paid this year, but they haven't outlaid it yet. But these are contracts that are ongoing, so it doesn't show the amount there. But on just individual contracts, current contracts, and so on, 725, with the top one being 29 million, and then there's just multiple little ones that are over $1 million, and it goes down by the page. Basically, I've got 100 to a page, and you eventually get down to where there are a few thousand here, a few thousand there, and it'll be for individual things like the videos we watched a couple weeks ago, where they've paid, like professional quality cost for amateur college student presentation to the classroom quality videos. Not even that, really, because I have a feeling that if you had a student that was getting graded on this, they would make a better video. So what is this UT Health thing? We have an article. See if I can get this to not jump up so far. There we go. $3 million grant awarded to UT Health Houston School of Public Health for sexual assault and harassment prevention intervention in the Air Force. And it's actually for studying it. A 4-year, $3 million grant to implement and evaluate a multi-level sexual assault and sexual harassment prevention study for active duty airmen has been awarded to the researchers at UT Health Houston by U.S. Department of Defense. Then we have this professor that is the principal investigator in the study. According to the Department of Defense, sexual assault and sexual harassment within the military have continued to increase over the past 3 years, creating significant public health problems. And it's very, very big deal for the military that this is occurring. Like this is actually incredibly disruptive to the work of the military, and it actually creates problems out in the rest of the public. Sexual assault can have serious consequences for the survivors and negatively affect productivity, mission readiness, and overall service members' well-being. And mission readiness is a big point, right? So if you have that 100 men and 1 woman, or 99 men and 1 woman, and that 1 woman has accused one of the guys of sexual assault, before you even know whether the guy did it or not, the divisiveness of that situation affects their ability to work together as a unit. So if they have to go overseas into another country and position themselves, be stationed on a base in this foreign country, and they have a job to do while they're there, the focus on that job is reduced by the amount of conflict that is created by that situation. And that is if the military doesn't remove both the perpetrator or accuser, like accuser and alleged perpetrator. And like we're not necessarily 100% whether there's a victim every time there's an accusation. Outside of the military, there is some evidence that rape allegations in the United States have a false rate of over 40%. So it's hard to tell how much of what is accused in the military is actually true either. And that's maybe their investigative process is a little easier because it's a closed environment. But aside from that, because we have this predisposition, this feminist trained predisposition to just believe accusers when they're women, we can't necessarily assume that the military doesn't have the same problem as the public. Let's see. Sexual assault and sexual harassment can be prevented by implementing interventions that promote healthy relationship skills. However, there's no current intervention for active duty service members. So they get this during training, like they go to boot camp and they get their regular training for military service, and then in addition to everything else they got to go through the training that we looked at, that teaches them how to use pronouns correctly according to social justice warriors.
Well, you could just segregate.
The woke.
I mean, segregation is not always a good idea, but sometimes it is, such as in the military, so as to prevent shit like this from happening. I mean, why do men and women need to be trained together, militarily speaking? It's not as if
it really doesn't need to be. Yeah. There's not a purpose for putting them together, actually. There's not
you can make the same case for schools.
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time, there were boys' schools and girls' schools, and that did seem to work kind of all right for a while before the so-called progressives put an end to it. In terms of civilian education, but this isn't civilian training we're talking about. It's in the interests of
national defense.
National defense.
Yeah. The only problem is women have sued to end that practice. So anytime we try to do something functional like that, as a anywhere in the United States, whether it's in our military, in our schools, in any other profession, in any type of treatment or any type of any service, anything. When we segregate, women sue for two reasons: to get into men's side of it and to keep men out of women's side of it. So they want women to have their own sex segregated spaces and services and jobs, environments of all kinds, right? But they don't want men to have any of the same things. They don't want men to have anything be sex segregated, anything be male only, anything be specifically for men, dedicated only to men, provided for men and not for women, or done by men and not by women. Even if women aren't good at it, even if women don't need it, even if women don't want it, feminists will sue to force segregation or to force the end of segregation. Even when it's not artificial, when it just naturally happens. Men form their own groups of clubs and recreational activities that they just want to hang out with the guys, and there's not some government agency or some authority keeping women out. Women will sue for inclusion. So it is, if the military were to go back to a segregated system, you would still have the battle of having to fight off feminist insistence that that's somehow bad and we have to stop it. And and you still wouldn't even get an opportunity to focus on, like I said, where there are instances where there are young men that fail to differentiate between work and play, and fail to differentiate between play and aggression, and the guidance of other men straightens them out. You'd still have to create some sort of official system to deal with when women fail to differentiate, or when women fail to avoid contact with immature men and boys. Because those are the guys they're going to hang out with. And then the next thing you have is there's an incident that has to be documented and recorded and investigated and adjudicated, and then the investigation has to be recorded and documented, and the adjudication has to be recorded and documented, and then there has to be a penalty applied, and so on. And it's not just a training issue anymore. Same with any other aspect. It's the same reason why human resources have been imposed on everything in the business world. Because as soon as you mix the sexes, you have to have a whole system to deal with it, instead of just having mentorship as a means of dealing with it. But women do not understand that, or they do not care, and they sue to impose that situation anyway. So this study, 4-year cluster randomized controlled trial, they've got a base where they're doing this experiment on our soldiers. It is this training called Code of Respect. And let's make sure this started in 2023. So this is something that's already going on. They're already doing this. They'll recruit 1,000 junior enlisted airmen between 18 to 24 years old, and they'll run them through this training. The grant shows that sexual assault and sexual harassment prevention is a priority to the Department of Defense. Like, when you think of what's the department called, it is not called the Department of Sexual Harassment and Sexual Assault Prevention. It's called the Department of Defense, and it is about being prepared to go to war, being prepared to deal somewhat with natural disasters, being prepared to have war come to the United States. So all of this is an unnecessary distraction. And all of this expense is an unnecessary expense that is only in place to support our ability to have a military that is like less than 17% women.
We might be fucked, ladies and gentlemen. We might be fucked. This might be the result of us being of warfare being waged against us by people who understand that war can be waged against us without a shot ever being fired. We should look to the world for certain countries and certain cultures who have learned over millennia that war can be waged without ever firing a single shot. Think of anyone?
It's almost as if that was the plan, maybe?
Yeah.
His name's Sun Tzu, ladies and gentlemen. he laid this out for a large country of people about how war is not about fighting, but about deceiving your enemies, so that you don't even need to fight them. You can psyop them into diminishing their own army.
Mm-hmm.
Eh?
Mm-hmm. Only
Pretty
army,
much.
the army, the society, if they're killing our biological productivity. We're not having kids.
When we do have kids, we're not educating them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm gonna. It's not China.
And
It's communism. It's
and
communism.
and on top of the fact that we're not educating them, the people who are the people around us are telling us that we're wrong for not wanting to not educate them under this state.
Yeah.
This is just so stupid. So stupid.
Our man says he served in the military for 12 years from 1999 to 2011. And it seemed like the entire time he was in, they were demoralizing the men.
And that's kind of where I think that they are going with that whole thing we were talking about. I think it was last week or the week. Well, definitely not last week because I was
Missing.
I was
Yeah.
gone. No, I've been going back to the gym, so I'm sorry. I just
Well, that's a good thing. Everybody should be doing that. Everybody that
yeah.
can.
Yeah. So, I was absent that week. But anyway, the week before that, we were talking about how they are just kind of trying to erase men from the military and using I'm sorry, god damn it, I forgot
The sexual assault prevention training.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. And
Oh, you're welcome.
um and that's what it all seems to be is just this one big psyop to prevent men from even wanting to join, not only the ones that are in there, right? Like just, oh, you better not touch the women's, and who would want to anyway? But I mean, yeah, it's just it's all one big it's all one big operation to you know reduce the powers that we have in the military.
Yeah, weaken them.
Yeah.
Imagine
Yeah.
if your country had been coerced into doing what it's doing by a cabal of its enemies. I forget who it was who outlined that provision in the first place. But just it's an interesting thought experiment. What if the powers that be in charge of your country had been coerced into doing what they're doing by a cabal of their enemies? Would
That's
it look
what's happening right
would it
now.
look exactly like what's happening right now? And yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly what's happening right now. You know,
Yeah. Our man says the whole time he was in the military, they were telling the men they could be replaced. You're disposable, right?
Jesus.
Yeah. And so what we're looking at here, like this paperwork here, basically is a report on the start of this training, and it has this statement, the abstract. Sexual assault within the military is a major public health problem impacting over 25,000 service members. SA can have serious consequences. Like 25,000 service members. How many total? And so how many total service members are there in the U.S. military? 2.86 million. And that includes the National Guard and the reserves.
Mhm.
So, where was it? 25,000 out of... Oops, we looked at that already. Out of... there it is. 2.86 million. So it's not really more prevalent. In fact, it's less prevalent than what feminists say takes place in the public. But,
Of course.
yeah. And then it goes on to say, the number one factor that increases a service member's risk for SA is having experienced sexual harassment. So this, I like, this indicates a failure to report, or a failure of handling if they report. And this is in 2023, right? When this was proposed or when this started. They have had sexual assault prevention training and response in place in the military since the 1990s. So we are 30 years in, basically over 30 years in, and whatever they were doing all this time that was guided by feminists has been totally ineffective.
I'm sorry, and I'm gonna go above and beyond that, but you know, if you can't withstand a little inappropriate conversation or provocation, what fucking business do you have being on the front lines and trying to protect this country against gunfire and ammunition?
I'm all for training the soldiers to exhibit
Yeah,
exemplary character,
no.
right? Which that's fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
I understand your point about toughness, but I'm all for training them to exhibit exemplary behavior. What I'm saying is, we have had a system in place. Our military has been paying for these types of trainings, these types of prevention systems, tracing back to the 1990s. So for over 30 years, the military has had systems in place, probably longer than that. But for over 30 years, the military has had definitely feminist-led systems in place to prevent soldiers from having no recourse when they are sexually harassed and to prevent sexual assault. And 25,000 service members are still affected. And the number one factor that increases a service member's risk for being sexually assaulted is that they've been sexually harassed. So they've been sexually harassed, and then it has the opportunity to escalate despite all of this stuff that we've been learning that they've paid billions of dollars for. Despite all of that, the problem has not even been solved. Like, what the fuck are they doing? Oh yeah, that's right. They're teaching people to use the correct pronouns. I forgot.
Yeah, because that totally fixes, the problems that that they're facing. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that the soldiers out there aren't facing, some kind of, but doesn't it just go to explain why maybe these I'll say it, these women maybe shouldn't be on the fucking front lines. Maybe they shouldn't be there. And because again, it's not and who are these women who are making these complaints? Are they people pushing the paper, or are these women on the front lines who are facing some kind of sexual assault from their counterparts, which I could understand, right? Like it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. Okay, got you. But this is just why and I'm sorry. I'm standing behind this. I think this is why they shouldn't be there in the
In
fucking
the first
first
place.
place.
Yeah, this is me changing my mind in real time as we go through this, and I've read more and more about this. Like, I was always really adamant about just degendering the draft,
Mm-hmm.
and I have been like that's been my position since day one as an MRA, that the draft shouldn't be gendered or it shouldn't exist.
Right.
And I'm about to end it shouldn't be gendered. It just shouldn't exist.
It
Right? There
should not.
should be no selective service. There
Nope.
should be no conscription, and all volunteer, all male military is the way to go. And if women want to form some sort of militias that can cooperate with the military from the outside, women can do that. Nothing is stopping them. We have a Second Amendment, and like, if I wanted to today, I could go out and start the process to get a firearm, and I could have one before 2 weeks has passed, and form a group of women that are prepared to defend my neighborhood in the Dayton metro area, and all that. We could do that. Nobody's stopping us. We don't actually have to be in the military to do that. Right? And so, and if the government wanted to have an all-female, I don't know, supplement to the military that didn't have any involvement with the all-male military, that would not be difficult to do. They can create a department or an agency for anything. So something like that could be created if it was worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea of integration within the military, I think just the fact that after 30 years of feminist-led efforts to deal with sexual misconduct in the military, we are being told by the head of this research that no prevention program that utilizes behavior change theories or other proven strategies has been developed for the military, and that despite all of these so-called advancements, 25,000 service members are impacted, and the number one factor that increases a service member's risk for SA is having experienced sexual harassment. That is a description of 30 years of failure.
Right. Right. But they do this all the while saying that, well, women are just as good to be able to serve on the front lines. And, we should have women. What? This is not equality. We should have women on the fucking front. And come on. Come on. You cannot have it both ways. You want to have women doing all of these, being in all of these positions of power, right? That you feel like, right? And what is the front line? The front line is not power. The front line is where you go to die.
If the government said, "Here's a gun, go and fight in Taiwan for Taiwanese self-determination," I'd be like, "No, go fuck yourself." But if the government said to me, "Here's a gun, defend your own property from China," I'd be like, "Give me that gun."
Yeah.
I'd be like, "Give my woman that gun. Give us
Yeah.
both that gun. We will stand side by side and shoot 1,000 fucking Chinamen." Sorry, that's gonna get taken out of context. But no,
Yeah, probably would.
if we're defending our own fucking countries, then by all means, I will fucking kill 1,000,000 people to defend our own properties. But I will not go to fucking Taiwan or Israel or Ukraine to defend some other nigger's property. Fuck you. Sorry, I keep dropping the N word when I'm not supposed to. But you know what? That was appropriate. That was an appropriate use of it. Fuck you.
There you go.
But
here's the thing. You know, if it's worth doing, men will step up to do it.
Mhm.
If our country were to actually be invaded, men would step up to defend it. And
Mhm.
women would too.
Yeah.
And when it comes to enlistment in the military, it is almost exclusively, male when it comes to men who go in expecting to be in combat, any kind of combat role. A few
But
women have sued for that, but most women, they don't want that.
but right, and they shouldn't, and they wouldn't unless
Right.
it becomes such a dire situation where, oh my god, all of our men are dying, and I need to take up arms to defend this country, right? And thankfully we have enough competent males, right? Or just male bodies, because that's really all that it takes, right? For someone to pick up a gun and shoot it at an enemy and fire a bullet into their fucking I, I don't
To
want
buy the sales pitch that you're going to learn all kinds of skills and get all kinds of prestige and be more employable and get your college paid for so that you can get yanked out of all of that and sent over to Desert Storm or Desert Shield or Somalia or any number of the places that Gen Xers were sent to and so on and whatever conflicts Zoomers and millennials are being sent to now without fulfilling any of the promises that the military made.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's what it has turned into. But I'm saying in a situation of actual warfare. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the women who would actually stand up and take arms and go into battle are few and far between. You
Yep.
know,
And fully capable of preparing themselves without joining the military.
exactly. So, we're talking in different, like, we're speaking in different tongues almost, right? Because we're thinking about the situations that have happened before us, and we're talking about what we're actually facing right now, and it's just a completely different situation, right?
Yeah.
Like we are theoretically thinking about what a war could look like, and we're these people who are these women who want to be a part of this army now have absolutely no idea of what it actually means to be in war
Yeah.
and defend a country.
Well, and
And
they certainly don't have much understanding of the history of it.
no, no. And, I mean, they're either going to learn the hard way or we're going to actually correct the situation. And it just sounds so fucking bad because correcting the situation means it means
It means kind of a reset, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, not the
yeah.
great reset that the elites are talking about, though. More of
No.
a societal collapse, unfortunately, and that's where we're
Yeah,
headed.
yeah.
The last thing that I'll bring up, and this is from their statement of, let's see if I can find the first page of it here. So the title is Building a Better Workplace, a Sexual Harassment Assault Prevention Program for Active Duty Members. This is their description of what the grant is paying for, basically, a report on that. So it tells the contracting organization, the principal investigator, and it's been prepared for the U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command, which interestingly buys a lot of monkeys. That's another thing that I discovered. The military has spent quite a bit of money buying research monkeys. Wonder what those are for.
Hmm.
We probably shouldn't get into that too far. But yeah. So what is accomplished under the goals? Their goals being let's see, design documents and obtain sign-offs, right? Develop the fully theoretically and empirically based program. The program has been developed and it's starting to be implemented. Usability test completed. Reports and manuscripts have been written. Right, the staff is now
Jesus
implementing
Christ.
the program, and here's what's accomplished under these goals: identify attitudes and beliefs towards sexual harassment and sexual assault, and
Wait, what?
prevention among junior enlisted service members.
Wait,
So,
what? Are
yeah,
we
they're
talking about
studying.
dogs?
What do these people think of sexual harassment and sexual assault? That's
Wait a minute.
it's basically the same kind of survey that feminists have done in university settings, in high school settings, and social settings, and so on
Wait a
for
minute,
the
but you
last 50
you said
years.
dogs. Did you not say dogs? Am
No,
I what?
no, I didn't say dogs.
What did you say?
I don't know what I said that sounded like dogs, but probably it came out sounding. My um speech
They
isn't necessarily
recruited
all that
they
great.
recruited
Yeah.
they, okay. All right.
So
I'm
it says this year we completed the analysis of data
For the
from.
record, I would even give my dog a gun.
Yeah, there you go. The analysis of data from in-depth interviews. So it's all survey interviews conducted with airmen. 28 airmen. Number equals 28. In April 2021 to July 2021. All right. I want to go back to a previous page here. All right. I want you to remember what I just said. They interviewed 21 airmen. Let's see. This is the University of Health. The cost of this particular $3.0 million. We found that airmen had mixed beliefs as to when an incident is considered sexual harassment and sexual assault,
oh my god.
which is pretty much normal. Like people have different opinions regarding levels of intoxication that cause a sex act to become non-consensual. Who is the perpetrator in such an incident? For instance, when I was at university, I had a classmate. used to go to parties when she was in high school. She talked about this when we were at university together. But she used to go to parties when she was in high school, and she would get drunk, and then she would just grab some guy by the shirt, drag him off into another room, and go fuck him. And then she took women's studies, and she found out, scare quotes, that she had been raped like 40 some times because
so
all
glad
only
I
had
never
one
went
of
to
those?
college.
dragged off to another room and fucked while she was drunk were perpetrators, even though she initiated the situation, and they were also drunk because they were men.
So glad I never went to college.
Mhm. Yeah, we had a really heated argument about that. I was like, whose idea was it? Who grabbed who? Who initiated things? Did any of them ever drag their heels? You know, maybe you're the rapist. She got really mad when I said that part.
Mm.
Right? How drunk were they? Right? Did they just have a beer and you had 6, or did they have just as much as you did and were barely stumbling when you dragged them off? Did any of them ever feel bad about it later on? It was pretty knockdown drag out. She was ready to hit me by the time we were done with that conversation.
You're not even allowed to ask those questions in the UK. It's a
Yeah.
hate.
Yeah, because you can't imagine that the woman might be the aggressor, right? So the two of us had very different attitudes about whether what happened in those instances constituted a sex crime, and also who was the bad guy if it did. Right? So, of course, I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. This is not new information. Airmen had mixed beliefs as to when an incident is considered sexual harassment and sexual assault. Okay, they spent $3 million to ask 21 or 28 airmen questions about it and learn something that we already knew about people. Great.
Wait, how much money?
$3 million.
For 28? 28?
Yeah. I'm like, I hope they did something besides ask those 28 people, because like that's $3 million.
How?
Jeez.
Oh my God. Where is this when we were breaking down the whole fucking Oh my God. 28 people had to be asked. And it took any kind of $1 million to figure this the fuck out. Jesus.
Yeah. Then we have this one, okay? Airmen who know the offender or perceive an incident as having low severity are less likely to consider an incident sexual harassment or sexual assault, and are less likely to report it. So the perceive an incident as having low severity, meaning they don't perceive an incident as having done great harm. Right? Like I had a coworker flirt with me when I worked at the gas station. I had no idea why. Right? But because I was already a mom at that point. I already had 3 kids. I'm like, what the heck are you flirting with me for? Why do you
You
want
was a
sloppy
MILF.
seconds?
You was a
I don't.
MILF. Hello.
But I was somebody else's wife. That really kind of that always
That doesn't stop
discombobulated me.
some people, okay?
No, you're right. It didn't stop some people, right? But it wasn't upsetting, right? And it never was an incident where, like, when I said, hey, I'm not doing this. This is a bad idea. What the
Yeah.
hell are you doing trying to get dibs on sloppy seconds from somebody else's marriage when you can be dating somebody who's single and raring to go? And that was the end of it. And I didn't feel harassed by that. There wasn't a pattern of behavior. There was a 5-minute conversation, and then and I never had a problem again. So why would I report that to somebody? What's the point? Just getting somebody in trouble? Because the problem was solved.
Yeah. It's done. Like
Right?
you
It's over
stood
with.
your ground, right?
So I wonder how many times in this 28 airmen interview, there were incidents where something happened that could be considered sexual misconduct, and the perpetrator was known to the victim, and the victim went, that was pretty shitty. I would rather you not do that again. Or, hey, you can get in trouble for doing that. Don't do that again. It doesn't bother me, but it might bother somebody else if you do it to them. And then they recalled that incident during the prevention training survey, and this was the result. Oh, they didn't take it seriously. Like, well, there's sometimes it's serious and sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you've experienced serious, you pretty well learn to differentiate between when it's serious and when it's not, because you don't want to be on edge all the time. So, just for the record, none of my kids are named Stacy, Richard. But yeah.
Stacy's mom, she's got it going on. I get it. I'm not even reading the chat, but I
Richard
get it.
Beer says, Hannah Wallen, because you were Stacy's mom. That's crazy. I was in a uniform that looked like a freaking bowling shirt. Like, what the hell? It's not even.
Doesn't matter. You still got it going on, Hannah.
But I made the cookies. That's the thing. When you make the cookies, you're the hot mom. But yeah, airmen who knew the offender might have worked things out with the offender, right? Airmen who perceived an incident as having low severity, while maybe to them the incident wasn't a big deal, and maybe again because of that they worked it out with the offender, right? So then why would they go report it to somebody if the problem is solved? Other factors that influence airmen's intention to report include fear of hurting the offender's career, perception that there will be no consequences for the offender. So there's the first thing, right? So again, I have to bring up 30 years. 30 years of us as civilians hearing about this problem existing in the military, right? And the military having to take measures and continuing to take measures for the last 30 years to address this problem. And all these feminist-led initiatives and all these organizations that have been paid individually millions, collectively billions of dollars to address this issue. And one of the factors that keeps airmen from reporting is the perception that there will be no consequence for the offender. How did they not address that sooner? Like, how, with feminists leading the way, feminists determining what they were going to do in the military in response to this type of that they never came up with a system that could reassure airmen or Marines or Army soldiers, right? Navy soldiers, sailors, that when they report to one of their superior officers that this has happened to them, that something would be done about it, and the individual would have face consequences and at least retraining of some sort. Fear of repercussions if they report the incident, particularly if the offender is higher ranking. So I work in a job that is low paying, not commonly done by people in the US. It's in the healthcare field, but it's for a nonprofit organization. It is the kind of work that, like, we do have a chain of command in my workplace. And in fact, human resources and the chain of command in my workplace is the same ladder. Okay. But if something like that happened to me, I have a workaround. I have another direction I can go for reporting that bypasses that whole chain of command. If it was on that chain of command, I can go over the head of the person who is responsible, or I can go around that chain. And that's been that way in the civilian world forever, for as long as there's been this type of dealing with sexual harassment and sexual misconduct and any other kind of conflict between men and women in the workplace, or women and women in the workplace, because that actually happens quite a bit too. But apparently, 30 years of feminist interference with the military has not led to a similar system. Billions of dollars of feminist influence in the military has not led to a similar system. And then also, they're afraid of being blamed. Which, again, how did feminists not change that? Like, feminists are useless. They had 30 years of access here. They had billions of dollars, and these are the attitudes they were complaining about in the 1970s.
Mm.
Like, feminists are useless.
Yeah. Eh, they are. I think it's only because of their academic stronghold that they still have any type of relevance. I mean, and not even that, because they absolutely do have relevance within our society, because they have been for so long such a major part in the oh god in
Well, in everything.
in
Feminism has wormed
everything.
its way into everything. It's in
In
the
every
legal field,
fucking
it's in
thing.
the medical field, it's in the education field, it's
Right,
in
in
business administration, it's in the
everywhere,
military.
in everywhere. And so they know that, they have the stronghold. So how in the world is anyone, any men's rights advocate, how are we going to, try to hold, do anything against them? But it's just gonna be so blaringly obvious to anyone when it comes down to a fight of disproportion, right? So, man, it's just gonna be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I mean, when we look at this and we see this paragraph is pretty much an admission of failure
Yeah.
of the system that feminists imposed on the military
Mm-hmm.
between the 1990s and today.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's all that is. All that is a paragraph of we didn't do nothing. We got nothing done. We sat on our thumbs.
Yep.
We had no effect, no impact on the experience of the soldiers, and we had no impact on the knowledge and understanding of the soldiers.
Yep.
Like, that's what
Yep.
they're saying right there.
Yep.
And so they have to do this whole new training creation, and then they have to study to see whether that training works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's literally what they've admitted here. And I want to remind you, all right, just going back here, this individual study, $3 million. University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, 192.3 million. All right. And ASM Research, 2.1 billion just since 2002. And they have achieved nothing. Zero. You fail.
It's less than zero. I mean, don't give them too much credit, Hannah. It's considerably less than zero.
Yeah, actually, in the negative, things are apparently worse. Because they've spent shit tons of money and they've confused people about gender, but they haven't solved the problem of sexual harassment, sexual assault in the military.
which is such a major problem. Oh my God, we gotta stop it
If we took women out of the military, most of it would be solved.
right now. Yes. Yep.
That's right there. But
Yep.
that's you can't say that, right? You can't suggest that maybe integration, gender
Yeah.
integration in the military is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. That's what we've been. Can you spare a fortune? Brother, can you spare a fortune for those poor helpless women that can't find anything else to do with their lives but fuck up the military? And with that, I think we have killed the subject. I think we pretty much. There really isn't anything else to say about this, honestly.
No,
It,
I mean,
it's not
w-
cost effective to have a military that integrates men and women together in military service. Like, Lauren, what were you gonna
nothing.
say?
No, nothing at all. And what you're gonna be left with is a bunch of fucking angry I'm sorry to say it, but dykes who are mad because they have lost something that they felt that they have a place
Yeah,
in being, and listen, there is such a rearrangement of employment that's happening right now and probably for the next 4 years because of the way that our society is being restructured, and it's mostly in part due to the fact that Trump is here and he is emphasizing the different areas in which we need to be focused on. But you know I mean, there is a job like jobs like mine are going to be gone. You know, there's a lot of jobs that are going to not be existent unless you know how to adapt.
yeah,
And, so these, it feels like just like the postal service, right? Because that's really is a jobs. It's really is something that people go to just to have a job. Those jobs are going to be gone, right? Who's getting physical mail?
well, I mean,
And
Amazon's going to drone delivery,
exactly,
and
right? Like
there's
these services are being incorporated into one another
yeah,
by these bigger and bigger companies. So, a lot of these jobs, people are going to have to find a place to go, a place to be. They're being pushed out and maybe for rightful reason, but, you're going to have to find some actual skills.
yeah. There's some jobs that'll be around for longer. It's going to take a much more complex system to replace caregivers and nurses than it will to
Hmm.
replace data entry specialists and uh, people who, well, for instance, with mail, um, a significant amount of what used to be sent on paper to people's homes is now being sent electronically. And
Hmm.
a lot of communication that used to take place through the post office is now taking place through that little pocket computer that everybody keeps calling a phone. And
Hmm.
yeah, your mobile device does so much other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and we used to call mobile devices that did about 10% of what the mobile devices we call phones today can do. personal assistants, electronic personal assistants. And personal assistant used to be a widespread job. There's still people that use personal assistants that are like human, as you know, like they'll hire personal assistants, but everyone has an electronic personal assistant now in their pocket. And as a result, there's a significant amount of what used to be done on paper that is just not anymore. My old profession, I had a 25-year career as a professional wedding photographer. That is a dying industry. If you don't have a gimmick, it's like the song from that movie about Gypsy Rose Lee. You got to have a gimmick if you want to win it. But you have to be doing something unique or different, at least. It doesn't have to be something nobody else is doing, but it has to be something that's maybe unusual before people will spend a few $1,000s getting a wedding album created by you. And it used to be pretty common. Of course, it wasn't a few $1,000s. I think we had people shelling out between 500 and 1,000, depending on how many services. Like if we made a video and everything, then it was more because there's a lot of work that goes into that, right? But people are having, their aunt or their uncle or their cousin do a lot of photography. People are buying disposable cameras and then uploading the pictures to a DVD and sending them out to family members. People are just gathering the pictures from their family members' phones, right? Setting up their phones to record and so on. And so you see a lot more weddings that aren't getting covered anymore
I used to
by
have
professionals.
I used to have to deliver letters for a living and small packages. I would leave it up to the drivers to deliver the large packages. And I assume in the future, it's going to be drones delivering the large packages, or at least the medium-sized packages. But it's going to be left up to the humans to deliver the letters, because you can't give such an unimportant job to robots.
Yeah.
So if ever I do need to return to His Majesty's pleasure delivering letters, it's nice to know I'll be able to, unless unless any of that is sideswiped by anyone who gets in touch with the Royal Mail and says, "Don't give this guy a job; he's a fascist." Luckily, I won't have to return to that job, as long as you'll keep me above board.
There we go.
You'll be delivering your large packages over here. Thank you.
Hopefully,
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, delivery services
maybe
over
for
here.
UPS or FedEx or something.
Yeah. There are tons of delivery services over here. Drone delivery is basically used just in circumstances where the package is just getting dropped off and nobody has to sign for it or anything like that. I don't think that drones are sophisticated enough yet to get signatures. But they have a camera on them so they can prove they delivered the package. But there's still human delivery for if it requires a signature. And then there's a whole section of deliveries that require signatures that after you've signed for it, you find out you got to go to court and stuff like that. Those are usually delivered by cops though. But in any case, yeah, it's going to be a brave new world with regard to employment options. And I understand why women are wanting more and more access to men's employment options. But the reality is, if this is the result for the employer, it's not cost effective to hire women. If feminists can't straighten their shit out and either solve the problems that they claim to exist to address, or like get off the pot, shit or get off the pot, feminists, then all they are doing is making it less cost effective to hire women. So I don't think we have any more super chats. I don't think we have any more Rumble rants. Do we have? I don't think we have any more. We do have a super chat. So I don't know if I read this one or not. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, when men go on strike, society loses its basic needs and comforts. When women go on strike, yeah, I read this. Your children become messed up and all moral foundations fly out the window as traditional morality is replaced by a victim narrative. Welcome to decades of women on strike. And I think it's salient as a point to end with, because
there's no such thing as men going on strike. If there was, humanity would have dissolved by now.
There's workers in certain industries going on strike, right? But when I was in high school, I took calculus from a teacher who was a teacher because it was illegal for him to go on strike during the 1980s when his industry went on strike. He was an air traffic controller. We just talked about that not too long ago too. We don't do right by air traffic controllers. I will say that. They need the proper tools to do their job if you don't want people to die in the hundreds and thousands. And they also need the proper environment to do their job. It's a very stressful job, and it's made a lot worse by lack of proper equipment and poor hours and so on. So in the 80s, that sort of hit a peak. This is a big problem situation, and the government wasn't listening to them, and they went on strike, and they all got fired by Ronald Reagan. And I lucked out personally by getting to have this man as a teacher. But I think that the system did not luck out by losing him as an air traffic controller. And so, yeah, when men participate in strikes, regardless of what industry they're in, it results in such a disaster that there are industries that are primarily made up of men that the law says you can't strike. Right? Whereas it's a very rare thing for there to be an industry. I think the education industry, maybe they're not allowed to strike. But not very many industries are banned from going on strike that are primarily made up of women. And there's a reason for that. So, thanks everybody for going through this. I know the information we looked at was very dry, but I think the conversation was very productive. So thanks everybody for going through that information with me. Thanks to my two co-hosts especially for staring at this on their screen. And, thanks to Brian for helping me out to make sure this can happen, and everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Good night, y'all.
We will see you next Thursday.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.